Today we're going to be talking about one of the most important aspects of our own life, and that is our relationship with loss. Loss is a guaranteed part of life. Sadly, it is one of the things that every person universally will experience. You'll experience it in various degrees through your life. And whenever there's loss, there is grief. And so what is grief? How do we work with it? And how does it transform us is part of what I'm going to be talking to you about today. Grief is the act of love that has nothing left to do but to try and process the loss that has come from our life. And what is universally true is that who you are before you lose something and who you are after that process is different. Grief shakes the very foundation of our life and transforms us. It takes us into a new, evolved version of ourselves, often one we didn't expect to be. And so understanding that grief is a process of metamorphosis, a process of transformation, a process where we go through a rebirthing of ourselves into a world that is different to how it was before, is one that requires deep care, compassion, love, and support. Grief can happen on multiple levels. We can have grief that comes from the loss of a dream. We can have grief that comes from the loss of a friend. We can have grief that comes from the loss of an opportunity. All loss is relevant loss. And where we are in the world at the moment, as we're experiencing the level of transformation that is imposed on us through a pandemic, each of us is processing loss on multiple levels. Loss is not something that needs to be compared between each other. It is something that needs to be honored as the truth of my experience, as I'll talk a bit more about later on. To understand grief, or to at least have permission to experience grief, it's useful to understand loss and the different types of losses that we can experience. There are many words that describe loss, and there are some categories that when we understand them, we can start to get a perspective of the type of loss that I'm working through and what that means for me. One of the kinds of losses we can experience is a loss that we call invisible loss. Invisible loss is where I have felt the pain of losing something that is not generally noticed in the outside world. If I'm diagnosed with an illness, I may have the loss of something that was important to me. Maybe the loss of good sleep, or the loss of a dream, or the loss of stability in my life. Invisible loss is often part of miscarriages. Invisible losses can also be things that we're keeping secret from other people, where we don't want others to know that we've lost something. This can be unrequited love even, where I've lost the possibility of being with somebody that I had fallen in love with. Invisible losses often have a secrecy around them. And that is one of the most important dynamics of grieving, that is to bring that out into the open in a place where you feel safe, to reveal it. We then get anticipatory losses. This is where there's an expected loss. Sometimes if I'm watching a loved one going through a process of dying, they've got a terminal illness or dementia or something, is I can grieve the loss of that person before their actual death. When I get notice around a job that is changing, I can be in a place of grief for what is coming. This is a loss that has some confusion because time is not natural in it. And there's often a lot of guilt for feeling things where we have a sense of I shouldn't be feeling it yet. Sadly, the next kind of loss is one that all of us are very familiar with at the moment, and that's chronic loss. That's just one loss after the other. I've worked with some people where they don't even want to look at their social media or their WhatsApp anymore because it's another notification of someone in their circle that has been impacted by COVID. Chronic loss is where we don't have a chance to catch our breath after one loss, and then there's more. And this doesn't only need to be about death. I could lose my relationship and then feel like I've lost my home, and then lose a client. Wherever there's that loss and it's perpetual, it's just one blow after the other, that is chronic loss. And often that leads to quite a stuckness in our grieving process. We then get a kind of loss called disenfranchised loss. And this is loss where we don't expect it to be there, or the world doesn't think we should be feeling the loss. So the loss of an ex, the loss of an online friend, somebody you haven't even met, the loss of a pet that others may not have known is that important to you. Maybe you're in a relationship that is a secret relationship, an affair, and that person dies. And so there's a sense of loss, but it's not publicly accepted as okay to feel it. The last kind of loss to think about today is ambiguous loss. Ambiguous loss is where there's confusion. I don't even know what it is that I've lost, but I'm feeling like something is not the same anymore. This can be the loss of chemistry in a relationship, the loss of a friendship. So we can start to see, as we explore all these types of losses, that each of them have its own palette, its own sort of sense of dimension that influences the way we grieve it. And we cannot, as I said, compare our grief to another person, our loss to another person, because grief inherently at the heart of it is personal. It's a journey of my own identity, my own life, my own foundation being shaken up, and then me trying to move through the process to find a new way forward. Grief is not a competition. And sadly, when many people are grieving the loss of one person, there is sometimes a sense of comparison of you're doing it this way and I'm doing it this way. You're doing it right, I'm doing it wrong. Grief is personal. That doesn't mean it needs to be secretive. It means it needs to be honored in the uniqueness of its experience for you. Grief alters your story of life, and the emotions that come up for you are ones that inform you around what the loss is. There are many beautiful art journaling exercises to help you through a grieving process. And one of the ones that I've worked with that is a favorite of mine is one where there's 3 circles. You draw a circle in the center of the page, and in there you describe the loss that you're experiencing. In the next circle, it's what have you lost because of that loss? And in the 3rd circle, what are you scared of losing now that you've lost all of that? And that story of those concentric circles of grief is so unique. I couldn't even begin to do that for you. That would be something that you would discover through your process of honoring your grief, honoring the fact that you're moving through a process of loss. Grief is chaotic. There is no rational process to grief. I cannot tell you the amount of time they've asked people to describe, how do I grieve? Give me the 4 steps. And there are stages to grief. There are many models that describe the 5 stages as trauma and denial, anger, bartering, depression and acceptance. It's a typical model of the types of stages we move through, but it's chaotic. It's an emotional roller coaster, as we saw in the Corona Coaster video. It's got dimensions that one day I'm fine, and suddenly I'm walking in the aisle of the shops and I see one of my clients had this. They see a sauce bottle, and they only used to buy that sauce for their partner that died, and suddenly the world collapses again. It's erratic. It's chaotic. It's disruptive. A part of you dies, and a part of you is trying to be reborn. It is unpredictable, as I've just said. There is no way to know how long it's going to take. We were sitting with somebody the other day, and their partner died 17 years ago, and they're still trying to find a rational story for what happened. Especially when it's a traumatic death, where there's suicide involved, or there's questions around the death. It's unpredictable. And grief is contradictory. The hardest part of grief is the permission to live again. That I'm still alive, whilst a part of me is lost. And to try and live with our grief next to our joy. To say I can laugh again without feeling guilty about that. That life and death can coexist next to each other. And one doesn't go away so the other one can be born again. Grief is a process of integration. Of saying I learn how to live with the loss. And enjoy my life again. And to hold that treasure of that loss within me. That memory that will continue to walk with me. It's paradoxical. It has no sort of sense of rhyme and reason to it. Mourning is the things that we do to help us move through a state of grief. So where grieving is the emotional response to loss, mourning is the process of adjusting to the world again. Because it's one of the hardest things for people in grief. You may experience this. The world all seems to be carrying on like nothing's happened. And here it is, my world is completely altered. I feel like I just don't know what to do. And we keep taking steps. We wake up every day and we learn how to live again. And over a period of time, whatever time that is for you, with enough support, and please know this is not a journey that you walk alone. It's a journey that requires a space to express yourself and reflect. And as you continue to walk along that journey, there will be milestones, there will be learnings, there will be new things that you do. And one of the most valuable tools that people have to be able to progress through time and to come to a place of feeling empowered again is rituals. Rituals allow us to honor something, to say something is transforming and changing. These can be private rituals and public rituals. There can be the rituals that your religion takes you through in the process of prayer and funerals. And then there can be the private rituals of sending a letter, of what you do on their first birthday that you miss, whatever it is. But honoring that the rituals are valuable milestones of honoring that person in your life. Mourning is action. It's using words and things that you can do to feel like there's some steps being taken. And I encourage you, there's so much beautiful resources available to support you in your grief. Journaling, circles, places to express yourself, rituals that you can perform. Reach out and look for those things that are useful for you. Grief is not something that goes away. I always say to clients that I work with, it just means that you're able to catch your breath more in between. When the memory of a person comes up for you, It's always a valuable moment to know that they're always with you in your life. And so I love this quote that I'm going to end off today's talk with. Grief is like glitter. You can throw a handful of glitter up in the air. When you try to clean it up, you'll never get it all. Even long after the event, you will still find glitter tucked into the corners. It'll always be there, somewhere. And that is the gift of love that you will always remember as you walk along. If you need any support, I'm always available to you. Sending lots of love. Namaste.